All right, well, let's get started. It is now 3:02. We might have some additional individuals that'll come join us as we move forward. We just wanted to welcome each one of you to the Citywide Advisory Committee. This is the Thursday, December 16th, regularly scheduled meeting. Today, we are going to meet the Deputy Director of Comprehensive Planning. And then we're going to really talk a little bit about our proposed schedule and timeline. We know that we were originally supposed to review Module 2, but because of its complexity and its great deal of length and detail, it was taking us a little bit longer. So we're still working on that, but we want to share that new schedule and timeline with you. See if you have any comments or suggestions or recommendations for us to do better. Then we're also going to take a look at our community engagement outline. And we heard you at our last meeting talk to us about the importance of hearing from a multitude of different populations throughout our city, making sure that we are hearing from everyone throughout our community and making sure that all of those items are reflected in the zoning code rewrite as we move forward. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jessica Zlag. She's going to walk you through a little bit of the comprehensive plan and tell you a little bit about herself and her perspective and what she's going to add to our team. So we're really excited to have her aboard. And Lena, if you'll go to the next, yep. So as we noted, we'll meet Jessica. We'll talk about that proposed schedule and timeline, then moving on to that community engagement outline. And then we're starting the meeting today with 2 attendees. So we'll ask for them to provide any comments that they might have or recommendations to us as well. And if we could go to the next slide as well, just to kind of remind us where we are in the process. So early on, we organized the work, and then we created the Citywide Advisory Committee. You guys have read phase 2, which is the Diagnostics and Solutions Report. So it is our consulting partners' review of what they see and what they heard from our community members, what we're missing as a city and what the hopes and aspirations are for us to achieve some of our goals. We're kind of right in that middle of that phase 3, which is where we're talking about those modules. So module 1, we saw early on, that really discussed the allowed uses and what, if it was a permitted use, what are the standards that are attached to that. We're now moving on to that really meaty part, which is really the important part, which is what we're going to all recognize is how things look and feel through those design standards. And then once we get that complete, we'll move on to module 3, which is really that process and procedures. Once we get all of that done, we're going to take module 1, module 2, and module 3 based on the feedback we've received, and we're going to consolidate that into a single code and make sure that the community has an opportunity to review that as well before we start that final adoption process. And so then we will go before the Planning and Zoning Commission for a formal recommendation, and then moving on to the City Council, which the public will have an opportunity to provide comment at that time as well. So just as a reminder, we're kind of right in the middle of all the good things that are happening. And that's about what we have for you today. So I just wanted to remind us where we are in the process. And then I'm going to hand it over to Jessica Zlag, our new Comprehensive Planning Deputy Director. So Jessica, welcome.
Thanks. All right, can everybody hear me? So
yep, you sound great.
Right, I see. Great. Thank you for nods and the voice of you can hear me. Hi everybody, I'm Jessica Zlag. It's a funny spelling of my last name, but just ignore that S. It's Zlag. And I'm the new Deputy Director of Comp Planning, as Andrea said. I've been on board for about 2 months, started in October, right after your last meeting. So time has flown, but I'm really excited to spend time with you all today. I want to share a little bit with you about me, and then just kind of jumping in. As Andrea said, we're like in about the middle of this project, and this is the real meat of the project too. So getting up to speed on where we are, and then just some thoughts to share with you that you'll see embedded throughout the rest of our presentation today with other staff. Before really diving into introducing me, I do want to thank all of you for your service and dedication to this project. This is an incredibly important piece of work in realizing the vision and goals of Blueprint Boise, and to build and nurture the city and the communities that you all love. I see that love not just in moving to Boise 2 months ago with my family, and then getting to know staff at the city, watching the last few Citywide Advisory Committee meetings involving all of you. And I just can't thank you enough for your time, because I know that this has been just a longish process, and there's still work to be done, and thank you for that dedication. There are 2 new staff. Lena and I started about 2 weeks apart from each other. Lena's her video wasn't working, so she has called in, but Lena Walker started as an assistant comprehensive planner with the city in October as well. She is a U of I grad, but a different I, not Idaho, Illinois. And she's originally from Portland, so we're happy to have her on the comp planning team. And then for me, so I actually just moved from Alaska. I was there for the last 5 years. I was working as a senior planner for Alta Planning and Design, who does a lot of bicycle and pedestrian type work. And I was also the executive director for a national heritage area that provided large federal grants made available through Congress to fund local projects at the community level. So federal funding, but working on boots on the ground with some of the smaller communities up in Alaska that the heritage area was in. Before that, I was in Seattle for 12 years, managing a transportation management association, and worked closely with the city Department of Transportation there, the Department of Planning, the regional transit agencies, and downtown business associations. So much larger city than Boise, but they're all the same kind of actors and players and departments and opportunities and challenges that cities face. That I'm really excited to be at Boise, and I think this is just a really exciting time in the city's period of growth and development. That there's a lot of wonderful open spaces. There's a wonderful livable community, that there's an importance to preserve that. And then there's opportunities to grow and change and maintain a lot of those characteristics as we move forward. And then just the last little bit about me. I'm originally from upstate New York. And then I moved here with my husband and 3.5-year-old, and expecting kiddo number 2 in just a few weeks. So you can't see me from here down, but that's to my benefit right now, because I am expecting, and I'll be back after maternity leave, and looking forward to seeing where this project has gone since then. So since coming on board with the city and in the PDS department, I've been brought up to speed on the last about 1.5 years worth of work on the zoning code rewrite, and look back through the modules, the outreach material, watched and read the notes for the last 2 CAC meetings. And I wanted to share with you my main takeaways, my 2 takeaways. One is that Blueprint Boise and the zoning code rewrite as pieces of work are incredibly interrelated. So much so that sometimes the conversations and questions are related directly to Blueprint Boise and how that plan is holding up since it was adopted in 2011. You know, is the plan still relevant? Are we realizing the vision of that plan? How is the zoning code rewrite related to that? I have those questions. I've seen you share those questions as well. And I think that that's a really big piece of this outreach strategy that we're going to present today and moving forward, of how do we talk about both of them, because they are so connected. And many of you are probably even more familiar with or my other observation is that you are probably more familiar with or more directly involved with Blueprint Boise than maybe the general population. So there might be people who are new to the area, or they're not aware of the plan, or it's just they're, they have other things that take their time. And so we really need to do a great job at bringing forward the vision and the themes, principles, and goals of Blueprint Boise throughout this project to keep everyone informed about where we are in that long range plan, and implementing it, and how to continue to make that a dynamic document that we continue to build off of, in realizing the type of city that we want to build. So Lena or Andrew, wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Whoever might have that bad. Thank you. Okay, so part of then what we'd like to accomplish tonight is to share with you a new schedule that reflects these needs identified by many of you, and also known by staff, in order to complete the zoning code update and provide for ample community engagement and the creation of a variety of tools that will help with those conversations. So the zoning code can become technical. There's a lot of information there, and we're creating those tools to help explain what it is and support the type of conversations needed about what it is. A few pieces that will be a part of that outreach include this robust conversation, so an outreach strategy, and ways to, parallel to that, ensure that at Blueprint Boise, we're making it dynamic, we're listening, and we're incorporating what we're hearing today into that plan so that it continues to evolve and change, and the zoning code reflects that. We've incorporated into our engagement strategy this focus on drilling the conversation down to more of the neighborhood and community group level. So bringing the zoning code rewrite and the subtle differences or larger differences between the current code and the new code right to communities, and being able to talk about it at that community level, I think is really important. And overall, just providing the necessary context throughout the next 3 months, but the next year and a half, always, as far as like what is the zoning code, what can it do, and how does it evolve over time to build the city that we want, as informed by our long range plans. So I just wanted to mainly introduce myself to all of you, and then kind of share with you some of that thinking that I've had just as far as coming on board new here for the last couple of weeks. And then really thank all of you for your time, because it is significant, and there will be more of your time asked of you. And so to please always feel free to reach out, provide feedback, and then let us know how things are going. Really appreciate it, and happy to be along for the ride. And with that, I'll kick it over to Deanna, who's going to talk about this new schedule to put in front of you today.
Yeah. Thanks, Jessica. So we took that framework we needed a new schedule that really listened to how can we provide that necessary context for the zoning code rewrite, and how can we make sure that we're doing, the 10 out of 10 public engagement for the zoning code rewrite. And we looked at our schedule and we said, that means we have to take our time to make sure that we're holding space to have these really important conversations. And we appreciate, the conversation at the October CAC about saying, there's a lot we need to cover and a lot that we need to go into. And we got to first make sure our public knows what we're doing, and then that we're taking the time to have those conversations. So we held that knowledge, and then the idea of, we're writing the code in modules. We're at module 2. Eventually, we're going to have to put everything back together and move it through an adoption process. So how can we do both things at once? How can we work this out? So we have a new schedule that gets us through the end of 2022 and to adoption in 2023. So what we're seeing here on the screen is really the next 6 months, starting in January. You'll see the top row is all of the CAC's meetings. So continuing our monthly meetings and providing a little bit more context about what we'll be talking about at each of those meetings. And really what we're looking for in January, February is early 2022, a release of Module 2. And that's where we're going to kick off our community engagement and spending 3 to 4 months having those conversations about Module 2, not rushing it in 1 month, but really taking our time and having that conversation, which Lindsay's going to outline that and open that up for your feedback to see, is this the right strategy for us? We'll do that through April. And while we're talking to our community about Module 2, we'll be working with the CAC like we've done previously, covering topics that are included in Module 3, which is the process and administration, with the goal to release Module 3 in spring of 2022. And we'll have those conversations about Module 2 or Module 3, similar to what we'll have done in Module 2. So what you're seeing in bold at the bottom is that we're not going to go silent to the community. We're going to continue to have this conversation about the zoning code rewrite the entire time, so that we're not losing momentum, that we're having these conversations and we're reaching new people as they choose to get involved or engaged. And then I think we can go to the next slide, which shows the latter half of 2022, which is summer through winter. And again, continuing to have our CAC meetings as we move in from Module 2, Module 3 to creating that consolidated code. And we'll be working with the CAC to help us as we go through those edits of the code and testing to see, is this the code that worked for us? And we'll continue to have that engagement and conversation with the community through the summer. And with the goal of having a full draft by the winter of 2022, in which we could begin, we can have that public outreach, and then we can submit that plan, because we'll have to submit a planning and zoning application for the plan to go through the public hearing process for potential adoption. And we're targeting submittal by the end of 2022. And if anyone's kind of followed along with the planning and zoning process, it takes quite a bit of time, which we'll have to go through public hearings through the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then if we make it past that, we'll go to City Council for final adoption, which we're targeting in July of 2023. So this is a big schedule, but you'll be able to take your time and look at that when Andrea shares the PowerPoint. So just kind of what is in the next 3 months, what we're doing right now at the end of December through January is we're really preparing for Module 2. Lindsay, like we said, is going to go over the community engagement, but we want to release a 400-page document with supporting material so that folks, if they want to read the huge Module 2, they can, but we also have supporting information to help them really understand, what does this mean for me and my neighborhood? So we've been working on that. And then once they can read and engage with the document, we're going to have opportunities from them to make their voice heard, and how they can work with us, staff, for us to work together and document how can we improve Module 2. And that's really, we're hoping to begin that all in early of 2022. And so now go ahead.
I just want to actually take a minute. I meant to pause a little bit there just after saying hello to everybody, but I think actually seeing just that first run through that schedule is good for all of you, but hoping we can take a second just to see if there are questions or thoughts that any of you have, even if it's just to me or the whole staff, and to check in before we jump in too fast here. Yes, Brian. I can see little pictures of everybody.
So I think for some of the architects and code wonks in the group, I think we've been waiting for Module 2 for a while. How long will we have as a committee to review that before we're kind of going out to the public with that that information? Just 1 month, is that the idea?
It will. Lindsay, yeah, maybe, or Andrea. Sorry.
Yeah, ultimately, we'd like to provide everybody the same opportunity. So you would have the opportunity to read the document at the same time as the public. But as part of us working through Module 2, we want to make sure that you have the tools that you need to really read it and understand what that is, and other people do as well. So kind of we're trying to create a guide that says this is where the new information starts, and this is where you can find those key components that we've been working really hard for the last year on, talking about parking, talking about setbacks and building heights and all of those key things. So we're targeting at the beginning of this year. So our hope is, maybe that next citywide advisory committee member meeting.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and just to add, the conversation about module 2, last time when we released module 1, it was a short conversation because I think we covered our outreach in 6 weeks. We're really designating 3 months to have that conversation with the community about module 2.
Okay, other thoughts? We have lots of other time built in after this too, but I just wanted to check in. So thanks, Brian. All right, maybe we did build in this break.
Yeah.
Right here was the break. Actually, if you wouldn't mind going back, let's just take a look at that, because I do want to just see if there are thoughts you all have, just thinking through the relationship of Blueprint Boise and the zoning code rewrite. I'm hoping we hit some themes there as far as what the conversation was around the last CAC meeting about how, this needs to show up more. And then that new schedule, there's the 3 months of outreach on module 2, but any thoughts too on this like year-long work to get to a consolidated plan by December of next year, and then the time that it would need to move through adoption?
All right,
Drew.
we have 2 names. Yeah, Drew and then Shellen.
I think I was wondering on the community engagement piece. I'm spending more time with the neighborhood association that I live in, and they've actually voted to do kind of a subset of their planning and zoning committee specifically focused on the conversations around the rewrite. It's kind of a broad question, but would you recommend waiting until you have the time to kind of frame and create the documents that would support that type of process? Because my guess is that NINA is not the only neighborhood association that'll be looking to do that.
Yeah, I think that just knowing we're targeting within a month, having the tools to pull apart the module 2 material and guide on how to, what is the outline, where to find the information you're looking for, visually expressing that will just help at that time, to if a group's getting together, that it would just support their conversations. So I would say yes, wait, but it's not that long of a wait. If next month.
That's super helpful.
Sounds like a time where they could expect some material to look at.
Yeah, that's super helpful to know. It gives us a bit of a timeline, and a month or 2 is not long at all to wait. So thanks.
And if your committee is fairly new, Drew, they can make themselves familiar with some of the module 1 information. So if they're just tapping in, learning what the proposed uses were and kind of covering that background information to dive. Of course, we'll try to cover module 1 before we have the conversation about module 2, but more background information is always useful.
Yeah, thanks, Sienna.
And then we had Shellen, right?
Shellen. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I had 2 questions, and the first one, forgive me if I just missed it, but when you were going through the new schedule, can you identify the places that have been extended? That's my first question, right? Just what's the difference in the 2 schedules? Because I don't have easy access to the old schedule, perhaps. And then my second question is, I think, Deanna, you said, or maybe it was you, Jessica, the community engagement, throughout 2022 we are doing. And I was wondering if you could just clarify, what is the we are doing community engagement? What does that look like? If now is the time or not, just at what point are we going to really understand what that looks like? So those are my two questions, if those are clear enough.
Go ahead, Deanna.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, Shellen, I think that we're gonna be evolving that community engagement, but after this feedback, literally, I think the next agenda item is for Lindsay to give an outline of what we're expecting community engagement to look like in the next 3 months, and then continue to evolve and iterate on that. So hopefully, if we could wait just until she opens that up, I think that will be helpful. And we are extending, so we've already, how do I say this? And maybe Andrea, you want to tap in this, but we were hoping to have a final consolidated draft and ready for adoption. So we're adding about 6 months to this schedule. And I guess I don't have the perfect, and maybe if Andrea, you have that schedule right in front of you of how we've added more time to module 2. And then we've already kind of used some time this fall and winter to get this sorted out.
Yeah, so I'm happy to elaborate a little bit. So Shellen, if we were looking at the original timeline that we initially had about 6 weeks for engagement of module 2 to take place. And module 2 was actually anticipated to come out in August. So we knew that as we started to get into module 2, it was much more complex. It was very complicated. And we wanted everybody to be able to understand what was in that document. So really make it digestible and easy to understand. So we've been working hard on the module itself, but really also looking, as I had mentioned before, for a guide that will help you get through that. So because not only is the complexity difficult for us to write and to explain, but we want to give everybody ample time to really digest that and understand what that means for them and their neighborhood. And so that initial 6 weeks will actually grow. So we've lost a couple of months really thinking about how we can, work on module 2 to make it the best that it can be, but also an additional 3 months for us to talk to our community and to really connect with them. So that's where that 6 months gap is. Mm-hmm. So extending it ultimately that 6 months. So taking a little bit of time for the creation of the document and then additional time to really engage with our public and hear what they're saying about that module.
And I will at least own a few weeks of adding to the time of just getting on board and kind of taking on ownership of the project and working with the existing team. So I think in the grand scheme of things, it won't add to, the 6 months is really about the time for community engagement and to get a consolidated plan that incorporates that feedback. But appreciate you all letting new staff get on board. To answer Shellen too, just some thoughts on the how will the we being the group of you as members of the CAC, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to maybe talk about, is there a role that you all would want to play, should play, knowing your time is precious and appreciate you tuning in once a month to provide us that feedback in addition to, other times we want to engage with you. But I think you are closer to this than probably most people, just by this opportunity that we have once a month to talk about where we are in the project. And so your help in many ways is appreciated. So I think once we get into that, the strategy and tactics with community engagement, maybe you'll see some places where it would make sense to have some of you more involved than not. But would appreciate your time for sure, always. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, just a quick question about the schedule also. So with the original timeline, we were told that we were sort of expected to stay through the end of 2022. With the new timeline, will we still have monthly meetings and a role in 2023 once things are submitted, or does our role sort of end at the point of submission to planning and zoning?
Right now, the ask would be to stay on through till the end. But I don't know if monthly at that point, maybe that's not the right amount, or maybe it's more. I think if you know, we're totally aware that this is a longer commitment than everyone maybe thought coming into it, and that's where the huge amount of thank you and appreciation comes in. If anyone has, you know, just there's some things going on in life and you need to dial it back, we can find a way to make it work for you. But then, yeah, that schedule changing does mean I think that we'll be looking to you for guidance, as especially as we move through adoption, to keep you aware of those hearings as they come up. I'm sure there's work to be done by then, that it will be nice to have you as a sounding board and involved with that as well. So if asking you to hold on a little bit longer, and totally realize too that it's longer than you originally thought. So thank you.
All right, and we also have a chat from Richard, which states communication is harder now during COVID, especially with populations with less online access or familiarity. In my neighborhood, I'm often surprised just how many fewer older adults we get input from when there are no in-person opportunities. And then Byron has also provided a comment that says maybe we'll be able to do some outdoor public park listening sessions. And these are really great things that are going to tie in really well with Lindsay Mosier's presentation as she moves into that community engagement piece.
So do we want to jump into that, Lindsay? And then we have some time after that as well. We can maybe talk a little bit more about the in-person, virtual, hybrid thinking, and then yeah, outdoor spaces, better weather coming the next few months.
Hopefully. Yeah, if we want to give a pause, if there's any other comments or questions, and then happy to move in to my portion as well.
Sounds good.
Cool. Okay, well, I will move forward. In case you guys, I haven't met all of you, my name is Lindsay Mosier. I'm the communications manager for planning and development services. Started back in May, went on parental leave, came back, and of course, jumped right back into kind of this project and where we're at now. So I was present, and our director of community engagement, Maria, led the last conversation with you guys in October, and I was a part of that. And so now we'll kind of jump in on the ideas and thoughts of how we're going to engage the community on Module 2. So just to kind of recap from the October meeting that we had with you guys, again, appreciate all of your feedback. I think it was a really great time for us to just kind of take a pause and realize that we really need some robust community engagement on this. It's not just something that we can glaze over and expect the community to jump on board with. So again, as a recap, what we heard, there's a lot of confusion on zoning complexities. Unless you're kind of in that world, it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. A little bit of distrust in the city and not feeling heard. So again, trying to reach different people in the community that might not quite be involved on a regular basis. What does successful engagement look like? Again, these are answers that you guys kind of provided. This isn't the entire list, but these are kind of the main takeaways that were reoccurring from the feedback we received. Making sure the community feels heard, making sure that there's accessibility for outreach, whether that's language, maybe that's our cross-disability task force, workshops with individual stakeholder groups, having easy to answer questions. I think a couple of our previous outreach may have been a little bit too technical just for a general person who might not have an understanding of zoning, and then being sure to incorporate visuals and real world examples for outreach. A couple of the major target audiences that were reoccurring were renters, development stakeholders, people that are involved in the process on a daily basis, students, and young professionals. Again, there were a lot more, but those were just a couple major ones that we heard. Next slide, please. So going back to what Jessica and Deanna said, kind of our timeline is, again, in January to have a few supporting documents with Module 2, and that includes kind of an infographic on how to navigate Module 2. It's been suggested by Clarion not to read it like a book, maybe just finding interests that impact you directly or that you might be interested in and going to that chapter and then reading from there. So as we mentioned, the outreach will kind of begin then in February, and it'll be about 3 months all the way through April. Some of the strategies that we discussed, bringing Blueprint Boise back into the picture. We also have some housing needs analysis that ties in with this, some new carbon neutral goals with the city, finding target groups with graphics to support, and having year-round conversation on Blueprint Boise and zoning. And that's another conversation that we've had internally of we can't stop the conversation just in those 3 months during Module 2 outreach. This needs to be a conversation throughout the year that's really educational and getting people involved and listening to understand what a comprehensive plan is. Why do we have one? 2011 was a long time ago. Is it still relevant? Yes. But at the same time, we also have a lot of new members of our community and making sure that they understand what the core of our community is and some of those goals. And so we've identified 3 different target groups, and I'll dive deeper into this on the next slide: the neighborhoods, the community members, and the technical members of the community. Next slide, please. So when we talk about, or when I think about 3 different audiences, one of the main things that we heard is having neighborhood conversations. And so we have come up with 7 neighborhoods, which pretty much covers the entire city, I believe, and going to each of those specific neighborhoods and having visuals and examples of how the zoning code rewrite would affect their neighborhood. And so the thought for us is to give a residential example and a commercial example. And so I think it will resonate more with people when you live on the bench and there's Vista Avenue, you know what the potential is to look like. It can hit more home, you can have an opportunity to give suggestions or ideas or things you might be concerned about in your area that you live, work, and play in. The second portion of the audience is the community conversations. We understand that not everybody is a homeowner and they might not have as quite as much allegiance to a specific part of the neighborhood, but we still need to include those members of the community to understand what that looks like for the zoning code rewrite. So these might be more broad reaching, but we can still pull some of those specific examples from maybe the Southeast neighborhood and say, here's an example of Southeast, a commercial development and what that might look like changed, or a residential development. And then again, this is more a general topic of zoning as well on a lot of the educational pieces and trying to reach some of those younger demographics, young professionals, renters, using our cross-disability task force really to tie into some of those underserved communities that might not be represented as much as we would like. And then the third is what I like to call our external experts. So it's a lot of people who use the zoning code and the comprehensive plan on more of an everyday basis. So a lot of you in the CAC are in that group, presenting to ULI, the architecture communities, Idaho Smart Growth, Building Contractors Association of Southwest Idaho, developers. Again, some of those people that work in the zoning more specifically on an everyday basis and having more of a technical conversation. They might not need all the visuals that the rest of the community needs, but still having an opportunity for them to give really constructive feedback on if this makes it easier, is this more difficult, what are their thoughts on some of these proposed changes. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to pause there because I just kind of focused on the audience for part 1, and then I'll get into the strategy for part 2. Do we have any questions or thoughts or ideas or specific groups that we might be missing just in general about this? I see Richard has his hand raised.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Can you hear me okay? I'm doing the earbuds. Okay, great. So on the technical groups, I didn't see anybody representing specifically environmental concerns, and considering that's, a big part of our Blueprint Boise, if one might even argue the overriding part of it, I think that's really important. And then I thought, like, who would that be? And it's really telling we don't actually have organizations that do much locally for our immediate environmental issues. There we don't actually. So it might be a little challenge to figure out who that would be. we have land trust of the Treasure Valley, which to some extent has some abilities along those lines of interest. We have ICL, and ICL will comment on some local issues, but for the most part, we just don't have that. So I think it will take a little bit of exploration as to who those technical experts might be. So thanks.
That's a great suggestion, Richard. I appreciate that. And we will definitely try and find some of those groups that you mentioned. So thank you.
And Drew has asked for us to go back to the slide so that we can take a look at the groups that we are considering to make sure that they can view those. Perfect. Thank you so much.
And I also just want to reiterate that not everybody is represented here. I kind of have a large list as well once we kind of get into the nitty-gritty individually. But again, just general, who are these different groups and target audiences that we're trying to reach? I can't see if there's any other hand raised. Sorry, I'm working on 2 screens right now. So Andrea, let me know if I'm missing anybody.
Yeah, it looks like, so Brad, your comment came in about homeowners. I think in the spirit of, as we mentioned, renters, we mean homeowners and renters, not just assuming that like, oh, by saying we're talking to the neighborhoods, so that means homeowners as an obvious group, and then renters are this other group. They both are important to represent.
Yeah, and I think more so when we kind of have some of these general community conversations, homeowners seem to be one of the dominant groups that we do hear from. So I don't want to discredit that at all, but renters kind of seem to be sometimes underrepresented in some of these conversations as well. Just because they're not a homeowner doesn't mean that their voice doesn't matter. So we just want to, try and tap in a little bit deeper on some of those groups to try and hear from
homeowners have
as well.
a lot more skin in the game than the renters do, more ties to the community.
I think the ties can vary depending on where you are in your life. If you have kids in school and your age, your interests. So I think both are important for sure.
And then just to kind of follow up with Richard, with module 1, early on, we'd created a stakeholders group. And so with module 1, we released that document and we sent it out to a number of different agencies or groups. And so a number of those were like the Army Corps of Engineers, Bureau of Land Management, the Environmental Protection Agency. It also rolled into a lot of our animal oriented groups as well. So Fish and Wildlife Services, the Idaho Department of Fish and Game. We've been speaking with a number of the raptor groups that are local. And so we will continue to do that as well. What we do is we release the document, say, here's how you can read the document, here's where you can find the document. And then we'd also like to invite you to these events or to send in comments. So we'll continue to do that as well. And so we have, quite the list of individuals that we have been contacting as we've moved through the process, and we'll continue to do that. And Francis has asked if we could provide that comprehensive list of the environmental and wildlife groups. I actually think a better idea would be for us to give you a list of everybody that we have been notifying. So then you're going to have an idea of all of the agencies, because we felt that hospitals were important, as well as like our roadways and transit companies, even Boise State University, all of those large players that play a key component in our community. So we'll go ahead and send that list out when we send you the minutes as well.
And to just make sure Shannon's comments captured too, I hope I'm not missing it else, but the business community, downtown association, chambers, those groups. So yeah, I think you'll see that on the list.
And Richard, you also wanted us to include the Audubon chapter, and we have been communicating with them. We actually visited with them with module 1 and hope to do so with module 2 as well.
Yeah, and once we share that list too, if you're not seeing a group, please let us know. Continue to add to that.
Any other questions or thoughts just so far on the audience portion? Again, this is just a little snippet of kind of the entire rest of the engagement plan, but I appreciate all the comments and suggestions as well. Okay, we'll move on. So some of the tactics that we have discussed, again, reiterating that we want to reintroduce Blueprint Boise. Some of the main 7 key goals that's included in that are really important and really coincide with the zoning code rewrite. A few things that we would like to integrate on the city level as well. We have some new carbon neutral goals, and we believe that the zoning code rewrite really aligns with these, and it's important to bring those into the conversation. Also, a couple of things that the city has been working on is a new housing needs analysis, which will kind of coincide in the spring as well, of what are our current needs. A lot of those have to do with housing and the zoning code and what some of these changes might look like and how it continue for us to have some smart growth. Visuals, as I mentioned earlier, our thought process is to have a very visual demonstration for each of the neighborhoods. And I have a couple examples later on in the presentation as well. How to read module 2, as I mentioned, we'll kind of have an infographic and a few different videos as well that describe how to navigate module 2, how to read it, what's the best way to navigate maybe to certain sections that you might want to be interested in, and then also a couple of videos. These videos are meant to be inclusive for the entire year. So our thought process is 2 videos. Part 1, kind of comprehensive plan and Blueprint Boise. Why was this created? Why do we need a comprehensive plan? Who was involved when we first created it? And then fast forwarding to today, how does the zoning code incorporate with that Blueprint Boise? Why is it important? Why are we going through a zoning code now? And how can this affect our future of the growth of Boise? So again, coinciding a couple of those to just make sure that people are educated and understanding this is a huge process. We're not taking it lightly, and we want to make sure people understand kind of what's happening in the city and why certain things are done a certain way. Next slide, please. So one of the tactics, Blueprint Boise, our 7 goals: environmental stewardship, predictable development patterns, stable neighborhoods, mixed-use activity centers, a connected community that values its culture, education, arts, and history, a strong, diverse economy, and a safe, healthy, and caring community. So bringing that back in to the conversation as kind of an opening for all of our engagement activities. Next slide, please. So planning area policies, also understanding that each area of the city has its own planning area policies, and kind of touching on some of those policies specifically. So when we're looking at a neighborhood, we might start talking about what are the characteristics that you like about this, certain desired patterns and size, density, mix of uses. So using that as a guide as well to incorporate the community in some of these conversations. Next slide, please. We also have different supplemental plans. These are all recent, have been made post 2011 from when Blueprint Boise. So it starts Sunset Neighborhood Plan is the most recent down to Barber Valley. And so I think those are important to bring into the conversation as well. Blueprint Boise has provided a guide. Some of these planning area plans and neighborhood plans, they all work together, and we need to make sure we have those conversations coincidentally. A few other things that have been adopted: the Transportation Action Plan, and then the Pathways Master Plan, which just went through planning and zoning last week and will head to City Council in the new year, which will hopefully be adopted into the comprehensive plan. Those are all in alignment with some of these conversations that we're having. Next slide, please. So this is an example. This is our West Downtown Neighborhood Plan that we worked on. And so these are some of the visuals that we're looking for to provide to the community to give an example of what an area might look like if it were developed with some of the proposed changes of the zoning code rewrite. So on the left, as you can see, we would provide a picture kind of what the current block might look like, and then as this shows, proposed changes. And so we're really trying to highlight the streetscapes, the building heights. We'll kind of point out some of those different changes that are proposed in the zoning code rewrite, and then collect feedback. Do we like how tall those buildings are allowed to be? What do we think of the sidewalk structures? Do we like the pathways? Do we like the open space in some of these? And so again, just kind of having that open conversation. And then the example on the right provides the overview of what a specific area might look like. As you can see, like the buildings start to go down as you get to more residential area. Having that conversation of, do people like how that goes? Is it too steep? Is it too fast? Is this how you envision your community looking in the future? So those are how we envision some of the visual aids. Again, I think this is a little bit easier for the community to sink in and have a little bit more relativeness to where they live, work, and play. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the opportunity to open up to questions. Again, this is just a brief overview as we'll kind of start getting into some of the nitty gritty over the next month and then planning out the dates and details of the rest of the conversation. But we wanted to make sure we provided, listen to you in October and now provide you guys an opportunity to give feedback if this is the right approach that we're taking and anything that we might be missing as well. I see Richard has his hand raised.
Thanks. Yeah, technical point, but I think it's important. Whatever reason, there's this fashion now, it looks like with architects and all, to have these extraordinarily wide angle perspective diagrams and visuals, which you just kind of, I think the one you showed was somewhat an example of that, where it literally looks like if you were to show, something that was 200 feet away, you would think it encompassed an entire city block. I mean, they're extremely deceptive. And for whatever reason, that's just become accepted practice right now. And and from perspective of a scientist, the visual display of information, you can do it in a way that is accurate and you can intentionally mislead with it. And for whatever reason right now, I think we intentionally mislead with those diagrams. So please, no extraordinarily wide angle perspective shots that put in a vast amount of fake space surrounding everything. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Richard. And one thing that we've talked about too is making sure that we maintain the character of what's in that specific area. So if it's an area that has a long-standing, maybe multicultural market, like we don't want to take away that market whatsoever, right? Like we want to present it that these are still the same businesses, but maybe in a new and fresh light for some of these districts. So I think, we're not trying to provide this crazy outlandish example, but something more that hits home of like, yeah, I know exactly where that market is. And that's a great enhancement to what it might be in the future, 20 years from now, if it were to get redeveloped. So thank you for that. Ian, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about the graphics. I do appreciate them from a visual standpoint. They're quick and easy ways to display and get information across. I guess my question would, and maybe this is getting too picky and too in the weeds, but just kind of being aware of the masses that are being shown. Are those kind of the max that is allowed with the new zoning, incorporating setbacks, all that kind of general stuff. And I fully understand and respect what Richard's saying. So I'm just kind of curious to know more about those graphics.
That's something that we're still working through as well, of like, do we want to represent what the maximum height could be, or more so something that fits that community in that specific area? So as we're trying to pick out certain areas of the community, different intersections, that's definitely something that we're trying to be mindful of like, okay, we need to be cognizant of what the community wants, what the zoning code represents, and all those different facets as well. So thank you. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a great question too, and one that we've even just been talking with our graphic designer about. Of we don't really. The reality is it won't be everything to the max everywhere at once, or ever. So how to have a menu of different visuals to look at to see how there could be very subtle changes, or maybe it's mostly streetscape changes for the pedestrian environment, or how a building here or there may, if using the new zoning code, be built. And then too, maybe it's worth seeing, and what does it look like? What is that scaling that happens? Just to give examples and help visual. I'm a very visual person too, so I think the more we have, the better for sure. But it's great. That was just a conversation we were having internally.
And I guess to add on to that a little bit without getting too into it, but I totally appreciate that, and I'm a visual person as well. I just want to make sure that we're putting that information forward and saying this is kind of a subjective interpretation of what it could be, and just making sure that people are aware of that. So,
yeah, and I think the
thank you.
scaling is important. As you were mentioning, Richard, too, like it's not this fisheye lens. I also know there's a tendency that it's always sunny and there's always families walking with dogs and a cup of coffee in all those renderings. So how do we make it representative of real life? Maybe we put a little snow pile in the corner.
Yep. And I think our thought is too, like, this is one of the easiest ways to resonate with the community on a general level, but we also don't want to set the expectation that this is how it will be. It's not. These are just examples of what future development can look like and presenting it, so at least they can start thinking about it, and maybe certain things that might be important to them. Is that setbacks? Is that landscaping? Is that building height? You know, some of those things. So yeah, thanks, Ian.
It looks like Drew has his hand up. Go ahead, Drew.
I really like the direction you're heading with this. My question is just what your method for collecting feedback looks like.
We've talked about a couple different ways. So when we talk about going to the neighborhoods, those will be it. The plan is to do in person, obviously with the timeline of February to April. Some of those will have to be more indoors. Of course, we'd like to do outdoors, maybe as the weather permits, and then a couple of those online as well, just being able to provide both of those resources. Survey has been a standard way that we kind of receive feedback. It's easy to kind of get concrete data right from there, but we're also trying to decide, is that the best way to receive the feedback? Just because it's so much, is that the best resource for us to use? So those are a couple of the things that we're just trying to really nail down right now. Of if we were to do a survey, what does that look like? What are we asking people to give feedback on? Is that just a general feedback, or is that saying, nope, I want the building height 1 story less than that? Examples. So still working through just a couple of those details, Drew, but thank you.
Okay, in the comments, we have Frances has said that she agrees with the comments been provided. Perhaps utilize photos for current images and not too slick in the future development images. And then we also have Byron with his hand raised.
Thank you. Yeah, back to the renderings and I guess any visual information. I don't know if this is really a question or maybe a word of warning, but whenever I do presentations for neighborhood groups and things like that, I think some of the one thing that's fairly important is to know what those cultural sites, historic sites, and even I guess the neighborhood sacred cows, for lack of a better term, are whenever people's neighborhoods are depicted, especially for, say, a city presentation. I think that's something that has come up in many of the public hearings and meetings that I've been a part of. And I think giving people a sense of assurance that the city knows or can acknowledge those sites. So that may be getting too specific, but I would say certainly reach out to, Arts and History Department, the other departments that have done cultural plans, cultural sites plans, and having those depicted in the visual information, I think would not only set people's minds at ease, but also kind of give them the acknowledgement from the city that the city understands kind of the differences between these neighborhoods. We, from the 50,000 foot view, the neighborhoods are kind of all the same, but when you live in these neighborhoods, of course, everyone's neighborhoods are very specific and very special.
That's a great piece of advice. Thank you, Byron. We'll definitely take that into account. Anybody else have questions, thoughts, suggestions, things to be concerned about?
I'm not seeing anybody with their hand raised or anything in the comments.
I see Andy with his hand raised.
Did he sneak it up?
I used the good old fashioned hand instead, excuse me, instead of the digital hand, which I'm not sure where to find and would probably just kill the program. Lindsay, as you start to collect information and you solicit feedback and comments from the city at large, one of the concerns I have is that I think a lot of if comments aren't reflected in the plans and the changes for a host of reasons, appropriate, inappropriate, relevant or not, how are we going to handle that in the feedback loop? Because I always get nervous when we solicit comments and we solicit feedback. And if that is not reflected, all of a sudden the process becomes suspect. And this process that we've been through as a collective is anything but suspect. This is one of the best processes I've been involved in. I started in processes like the Capitol Boulevard Special Design District 20 plus years ago. And the city does a great job of soliciting information. I just want to make sure that as we solicit it, we filter it, we have the ability to filter it, incorporate it as appropriate, and maybe respond if it's not appropriate. So let's not mix, or let's not miss that sort of response loop. So people, one, are absolutely positive that they are heard, and that they are, that when a situation or when a bit of information maybe doesn't get folded in, that they have a clear understanding why it doesn't get folded in. That's all. I'll learn about the electronic hand raise one of these days. Byron can teach me.
Thank you, Andy. Great comments and advice as well. So I appreciate that. Andrea, do you see anybody else?
I don't. We have a quiet group today. But, please know that this is not your last opportunity to provide comments. As always, in your minutes, we provide you with a follow-up survey. So if something didn't come to you today and you want to provide that and pass that information along, that's a great avenue for that. You also have the ability to go ahead and email me. I can make sure that all of those items are heard. It looks like Francis did sneak in one additional comment, and then Brad Nielsen has his hand raised as well. So Francis has noted in the comments that, are you thinking about having live interpreters for non-English community members or translated materials?
That's a great comment, Francis. Thank you for that. We do work as a city that if anybody ever wants any of our materials translated, we try to support those services. If someone asks, and we're trying to move towards the direction that that's kind of kosher with everything that we do moving forward, in alignment with any type of material that we might put out. But we're always happy to assist if anybody has any type of translation needs that they want, then we're happy to do so. And
Thanks,
I think
Lindsay.
Brad.
Yep. And then followed by Richard after that.
Yeah. Can I step this back just a little bit and ask a dumb question? Could I get somebody to explain to me what, in a nutshell, what module 1 was about? And then in a nutshell, what module 2 is, and is the public going to be able to comment on what module 1 was about?
Yeah, so if you remember, module 1 creates our zoning districts. And so what we heard then was we have way too many districts. And so we'd like to consolidate those down. We also heard that allowed uses should be expanded. So perhaps in the R3 zone, or even in some cases, the R2 zone, we should be allowing some of those really small scaled neighborhood oriented uses to take place. So maybe a small diner or ice cream shop, those things should be allowed within neighborhoods in the R3, and in some circumstances, the R2. We also created some mixed use zones, and that was a result of taking a look at Blueprint Boise and hearing what the community said early on. So we provided community engagement for Module 2. We did a number of community conversations. We also did a public survey. All of that information is available on the website. We summarized what we heard from the community. So we provided not only a summary, but we also felt that, as Andy had indicated, that individual comments are really important and we don't want to lose those. And so we attached each and every comment that came in as well, so that you can filter through that. You know, everybody knows that they have been heard and that their communication wasn't lost. So that was Module 1. Module 2 is going to get more into the details and how do things look and feel. So we're going to, when you look at a building, you know, where are sidewalks located? How wide are those sidewalks? How close are buildings to one another? Where are driveways located? How tall are buildings? So we're really going to talk about those, I guess, those defining characteristics that when you look at something, it makes you feel a certain way. So that's going to be the big piece that we talk about with Module 2. And then when we get into Module 3, we're going to really talk about process and procedure. So who actually reviews the application? Is that a staff member? Is that the Design Review Committee or the Historic Preservation Commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, or even the City Council? And so really, how many eyes are on it? What does that public participation look like? So when does the public provide comments? Is there a public hearing? Is there a neighborhood meeting? And then even, you know, what is the appeal process, so that everybody understands what that appeal process looks like and what the hierarchy looks like. So if something goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission and somebody isn't comfortable with the decision that was made, they know that they can now appeal that decision to the City Council. So does that help you, Dave, Brad?
Honestly, I think we've blown past Module 1 still. I don't remember getting too much comments on, you know, from the public on that. And from what I hear from the public, personally, I think we're missing the boat on that one, but I am the sand in the cog here. So just my opinion.
I see 2 more hands raised. I see Richard.
Real quick, I kind of wanted to just respond to Brad too, that maybe we should, you know, thinking about how Blueprint Boise needs to show up more in how we talk about the relationship between that plan and the zoning code rewrite. We shouldn't lose track of what Module 1 was in talking about Module 2. It's the same project. They're building on each other, and so I don't think that there is much value in not kind of talking about Module 1. If anything, it is then leading to, when we drill down at that neighborhood level, setting the table of like which zone you're in, what neighborhood you're in, and so I think there's always room to talk about it. There should be room to talk about it for sure.
Richard, do you want to go ahead and take your option, and then Shellen?
Sure. Yeah, you challenged this by saying we were quiet, so this is on you. Yeah, you know, so I appreciate having more time for public outreach. I think that's really important. I did notice, and let me just preface this with, I think it's really hard to do this for any institution, not just the city or whatever, but to do it in a really meaningful way. And that it's, you know, to get beyond yes, it's important for people to be heard. Kind of, it's ultimately politically, if nothing else. But to get beyond that and to, I guess, come with it, hopefully, with, and this is hard. It would be hard for me in this situation, but with the attitude that we will actually get some good solutions from the public, that they're out there. And especially when the public is confronted with something specific that they can relate to in their area that could help generalize to the kind of the more abstract things we talk about. And you've been talking about that, so that's good. But maybe in part, if we present some of this as a challenge to the public, in the sense that no, we don't have it solved, and we're just asking you if you like it, but there are some real outstanding challenges. And I realize in this module we talk about it more in terms of aesthetics, and so that's kind of more like to some extent I like it or I don't like it. But certainly there are functional aspects that still require some solving. For instance, we discussed the competition between for light amongst either solar or other uses of light, and we kind of put that aside because I guess it was a complex topic and difficult to digest. But perhaps the public, if given the opportunity, can weigh in with some good, real solutions, some creative solutions. And I know that that's challenging from an institutional perspective, but maybe just a little bit of kind of raising that expectation that we will get good, that we could get good solutions from the public, not just simply kind of closing some sort of feedback loop. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
That's great feedback, Richard. Deanna and I went through every single comment that we got through module 1. And really that was thousands of comments. And really the best comments we got were those constructive pieces of, have you thought about this? Or I've always thought that this might be a better way, or I've seen this in a community and I'd like to see it here, rather than just the traditional, I don't like it, and not explaining why they don't like it or offering a solution. So that's excellent. So I'm hoping that you're going to talk to your neighborhood group and really encourage them to bring forth those solutions.
Yes, that's a challenge, but okay.
It is a challenge, but I just at least wanted to share with all of you. So this is my first time working in the public sector. But I came at planning originally as a neighborhood member in Seattle, going to my neighborhood community group and sitting on committees. Drew, when you say that there's a subcommittee forming, it's just awesome. It's I don't think everyone's going to become a planner in the end, but the more that we have folks engaged on these really tough challenges and questions that we need to solve, and knowing more about kind of the driving data or policies or plans that we've had in the past, and knowing that there's many opportunities for beautiful solutions out of all of this, and we are prepared to help guide through that, and as planners and working the city, the responsibility is for us to kind of navigate through how we're going to get there, but it's a community project. We need a lot of good thinking on this, and that's kind of where my heart is originally as a community member, why I even started to like this stuff. It's because I felt like at the neighborhood level, I had an opportunity to provide input and it was heard.
All right, and we have some comments from Ben as well. His comments state that he likes the city's approach and plan to different stakeholder groups. I do think that module 1 went by with limited discussion about the allowed use table. within the proposed zone. I would hope that Module 1 receives attention along with Module 2 during the planned stakeholder outreach, especially the stakeholder groups that work closely within the code, such as developers and architects. So we'll go ahead and include that. And then I also have hands from Byron and then Shellen.
Thank you, Andrea. I had one more big picture question about outreach to local government. I wrote that in the chat, but as I was thinking about it, specifically ACHD, since they have so much jurisdiction over our roadways and it plays such an important integral part in the code, will those outreach efforts be, I guess, part of the public, front-facing or forward-facing outreach, or is that sort of a government to government behind the scenes sort of interface, or both?
I guess my hope is that it's both. When we release any type of deliverable, we send it to all of those agencies. We ask them for comments. We ask them to participate. We can only extend an offering and hope that they take that, but we would love for them to participate, in a multitude of ways, and really looking at what they have in their plans, whether it's their capital improvement plan or their pedestrian and bicycle plans. All of those things are so integral into our land use and our design standards. So no, we have encouraged them to participate. We've invited them to the table, and we'll continue to do so, and just hope that they participate in the process.
Great, thank you. I guess, on-street parking seems to be kind of that critical juncture there, because it is a controlling factor in parking reduction discussions. The city, of course, doesn't have jurisdiction over our roadways, so ACHD will have to play kind of a very important integral part if on-street parking becomes, allowed in the city for parking reductions. So thank you.
Shellen, do you want to take the floor?
Sure, thanks. I have some comments, and they might be a bit scattered, so just take them for what they're worth, and I will try to keep them organized. But I think to Brad's point, I think it's a really good one, is as we go through this and we take breaks, it's pretty easy for me to forget what we've learned and why we're here. And so as much as I see that the extension of the public comment period, or stakeholder outreach period, I see as important and critical with new staff coming on and the comments that you've received to date. I don't want anyone to be fooled that more time is going to be better or lead to a better, people are going to feel better about the change. I think it's about the quality of outreach and not necessarily about the length of outreach. So I just, I think for me, I come with sort of a project management background, is like, I would urge the city or the consultant team to really hold a person, a group of people accountable to meeting their goals in a timely manner. And if those goals mean having X many meetings, reaching this many hours of outreach, whatever those goals are, but a clear and concise set of goals that can be communicated amongst yourselves to hold you accountable, and us, us as these folks that have been coming here every month, accountable is I think really important. And I think to the point that Brad made again is like, you can't talk about module two without going back to module 1. I mean, Jessica, you said it very well and you reiterated that. So I just want to do the same. The next comment I guess I have is as you do that outreach, and I've mentioned this to Andrea before in the past, is having that data about who you've outreached to and how many hours you've done it is a very important way to open the discussion up. And it adds credibility to the person speaking and to the process. And so I would just remind you perhaps to make sure you track the data, track those things in a very in an unopinionated way, in just a data-driven way. And then lastly, to Ben's, I think it was Ben's comments, to me, the city has been doing stakeholder outreach for months. And so, I mean, you know, Andrea came to ULI, you know, this past fall. And so to close that feedback loop and say how that is going in, I don't want there to be a start and stop with stakeholder outreach. And I don't think anyone should look at it that way. I think you guys need to be out there often and everywhere. And I think someone needs to be held accountable to do so. So that at the end of the day, whether neighborhoods like it or not, you can say with eyes wide open, this is what we've been doing for 2.5 years. You've had 30 people on these calls for now 2.5 years, spending X many hours of time doing it. So I don't want you to start and stop your stakeholder outreach. I want you to think of it as a more organic process. And maybe you already do. Everyone's nodding, so maybe I'm just saying what you already know. But those are my very random thoughts.
No,
I had one
random
more. Sorry. The last one, this was to Ben's comments, is you reach out to developers or perhaps other members of the community. If you can figure out a way to get continuing education credits for people that are doing these things, I think it might get you a lot of interesting, it might get you some people that you wouldn't normally spend their hour or two. And I'm thinking of like, Byron's laughing at me, but AIA, continuing ed coursework, or USGBC, you know, lead folks. It's important stuff, and figure out how to make, you know, the engineers in the room and the architects in the room care. And so give them a Starbucks gift card or get them a continuing education, something, so that they'll show up.
That's funny that those are like on equal levels.
And I should say, don't do Starbucks. Do some local, you know, do something local, right? But like, go do Beans and Brew.
Thank you for your comments. And yeah, we totally acknowledge the ongoing and continuous need to show up. Because too, we don't want to get to January of next year and start to move through adoption, and everyone's like, "What is this about?" So yeah, we've identified that it's a long-term game, and it's not about more; it's more and better. As we continue to just find opportunities to talk to as many people as we can and really listen to their feedback. So thank you.
So we do have an additional comment. So Patrick has noted that, you know, the information that has been provided is great, and he doesn't have any additional suggestions to add at this time. Byron has said, Shellen, thanks for noting that socially acceptable way to bribe an architect into giving review time. I do want to say that I have been meeting with the American Institute of Architects, and I have met with them, I believe, on 3 separate occasions. And each time, I mean, there's always 100+ crowd, and they've been really great. I would like to reach out to some of those engineering groups in the same way. Francis has noted in the chat, I really like the community and stakeholder focused approach. I'm wondering whether after cycling through all outreach sessions and receive feedback and input, you can circle back to each of those groups with recaps and updates as to which suggestions or solutions have not been incorporated or not incorporated prior to moving on to module 3. I think that is a great suggestion, and I think it really builds upon, you know, Andy's suggestion that communication loop continue to be closed. So Andy says, thanks, Shellen. 1,000 comments from throughout the city on module 1 is very commendable response rate. How about a flying M card for the architects? You betcha. Angela is also voting for those engineers out there. So I think everybody's had some really great comments. Anybody want to provide anything else before we open it up? We do have some attendees that are joining us. We have actually 3 community members, and we we'd like to offer them the opportunity to participate as well. So I'm gonna pick on Sarah. Do you have anything that you'd like to add? And we'd like to thank you for joining us today as well. And I know I've been talking to Sarah offline. She's a member of the Urban Land Institute, and I will actually be joining her group in January for another info session. So if Sarah doesn't have anything to add, I'll go ahead and ask Craig if he has anything that he would like to ask or communicate to the group. All right, how about Mike? Mike, would you like to say anything to the group?
Yes, thanks, Andrea. And I want to thank all of you for this work, this really important work to get the, to review the zoning code and do this work to make our city a better place. What I would say as a developer and as a community member is that we need to be really thoughtful about how we develop our community here. We have an opportunity now with this zoning rewrite to set the stage for a positive, thoughtful way to accommodate the growth that we know is going to come here. So what I would say is, rather than to, I guess, bury our heads in the sand and try to stay attached to the way things used to be, we need to really think about how we can maintain the character of our community while making room for the organic growth from our sons and daughters, but also really need to think about all the attention we've attracted by the coastal markets and other markets. People are going to keep coming here, and we need to find a way to preserve the best of what Boise is, but also make room. And that's going to mean some changes. So keep working at it. I applaud your efforts and thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. Any of our other attendees, Craig or Sarah? If we don't hear anything, we do have a hand raised from Brad Nielsen again.
I know, Andrew, you're always worried about what I'm going to say.
No, we love it.
We have 3 people from the public that have joined us today. I was kind of curious to how they have found out about this. I have never seen anything or heard anybody that I know has ever heard about how to access this meeting. I think 3 people from the public's pretty sad. I don't think it represents our public. So I was kind of curious, how are people hearing about this? I know we don't want to be flooded with thousands of people. We don't got that kind of time, but who's putting out this information? Thanks.
Hey there, I am here. This is Sarah Cortez. Hello.
Oh, you go ahead.
Hello.
Okay. This is Sarah Cortez. I'm one of the public you speak of. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for holding this open meeting. I found out about it through ULI and Shellen. And I just wanted to hear the conversations. We have Andrea coming to do a talk with our group here in the first month of 2022, but I also wanted to weigh in and just let you know how much I appreciate considering density as we move forward.
Thank you, Sarah. Mike, do you want to touch bases with Brad? How did you hear about the ability to participate?
Okay, I think I had my mute on. I'm pretty involved with Urban Land Institute. Andrea's made a presentation to a group of us that are interested in the zoning rewrite. And we, of course, are going to be asked and called upon as developers. I'm a developer, a small scale developer and property owner. We're going to be called upon to build inventory for the growing city. And so it's important for us to be tied to the process. And of course, it's on the website. I got the link from the website, the city website.
Great, thanks, Mike. And then Craig, I don't know if you're out there, but if you'd like to share with how you heard about this opportunity, we'd love to hear that and see what's working and what may not be working.
Yeah, I apologize for not responding when you first asked. I'm trying to multitask, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm an architect with CSHQA, so well aware that the city is doing this process. Very active in ULI, and it was discussed at a meeting this morning, which is why I joined today. And I mean, it's the opportunity for our community to really do a zoning that meets today's needs, not 40 years ago, 50 years ago. It's very important. The way we were developing that long ago has certainly changed based upon what Boise is now compared to where it was. So very interested in the process. Thank you.
This is good. The American Institute of Architects, as well as the Urban Land Institute, sharing.
I will chime in at least that come January. So the meeting is available on the city's website. It's listed as a public meeting. And then there's the page for the zoning code rewrite with all of your bios and upcoming meetings and past presentations. It is there for the release of module 2 in the January meeting. There's going to be all of that toolkit of material that we're providing that goes out to all of you, that list of stakeholders that we'll be sending out, as well as a press release. So as our engagement wraps up and we release the next phase of this, I think you will start to see, we'll just be talking to a lot more people. And so this is an opportunity for them to join on this meeting and then also find that information after the fact on the city site.
All right, Esther.
Hello. So I guess I just wanted to respond to Brad. Brad, I think a couple of things, like in my neighborhood, for those that are part of our email listserv, our neighborhood email listserv, every time that we send out a planning and zoning, a neighborhood planning and zoning email, there is always a section on the zoning rewrite and a link to the information. So that's one way that I know in our neighborhood, for those that are actively engaged, that's one way that they can get information. And then the second thing, in terms of only having 3 people participate in the public, I guess, for many, we work 8 to 5, many, and then others do not. They work evening hours, but just keeping in mind that everyone has different work schedules or situations, family commitments. And so while we may not have a lot of participants during the meeting between 3 and 5, the mere fact that this recording is available for the public to watch or listen to at any given point throughout the day, the weeks, the months, is greatly appreciated, at least by me and others I know.
Thank you, Esther. And that's actually an excellent plug. We actually had a couple members that were unable to join us today, but they are going to have that opportunity to go back and revisit the YouTube video. And they're going to have the opportunity to respond using the survey that we provide later. So, not only is this a benefit by recording this for our public, but it's also really valuable to each of you If you have a conflicting meeting that you're unable to attend, you still have the ability to participate, understand and know what was said, and provide feedback. So always keep that in mind. Brad, you have your hand up one more time.
Yeah. Those places, those access points are appreciated. I seriously doubt that most of the public is going on the city website to find out, that this is happening. So is there some better ways that we can get this out to the public? I think Jessica mentioned some public report, but I can't remember the word you used, but like the news, whatever. But are there some better ways we can get this information out to people so we can get some true comments from the public? And I probably shouldn't say this, but it's like fingers on the chalkboard when I hear people say Boise, being a local and being born here.
I
Boise
promise
is,
I am working on it.
Okay, I appreciate it if you do.
My 3-year-old is on me.
Okay.
Mama, it is Boise.
I mean, no offense, but you can tell who's not from around here when they say Boise. But thank you.
It is on my radar for sure. I will try to scrub that. At least I don't have an East Coast accent anymore from being a kid out there. Which that sounds like more nails on chalkboard too. Appreciate your comments all around. And yes, the rollout will of module 2 in January. We'll have a press release, and so that'll show up then in different mediums as well. Just the news about this, and there's this meeting as an opportunity for public feedback and engagement, but there's going to be lots of opportunities. So whether it's you're seeing a majority of people here and then reporting, I love Shell's idea about like using the data to also share with you who we're talking to, how many people, where, what we're hearing throughout will be a part of these conversations as well. And I will work on my Boise.
All right. Does anybody have any parting comments? Last call. Well, we had a really great discussion today about our proposed extension of our timeline. We also had some really great discussions about our outreach efforts and how we can make them the best that they can be, and really focusing on quality, making sure that we're tracking that information and then following up with individuals to say, yes, we're able to incorporate this, or we're unable to incorporate this because it's supportive of our city goals. I want to make sure that everybody knows that the minutes will be coming. I'll send those out in the morning to you. The minutes will, it contain the discussion topics and the feedback that we received. We'll also include that survey link. So if you think of something that you didn't think of today, go ahead and put it in there, or shoot us an email. Keep those communication lines open as well. And then our next Citywide Advisory Committee meeting is actually Thursday, January 20th. So we'll be seeing you after the holidays. So we hope that you have happy, safe, and healthy holidays before we see you next. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Hey, Andy.
Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you.
Being a 5th generation Boisean still doesn't get you a cold cup of coffee at a cheap diner, so don't worry about it.
It's all right. I'm a transplant. I know. I gotta pay my dues.
That's all right.